Coming up on our newscast, in the U.S., it looks like Republicans will gain control of the Senate, judging by the early results of the midterm election. And as the yen plummets, the hardest hit have been Korean automakers and, of course, smaller companies. We turn to an expert for insights. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry once again says China holds the key to convincing North Korea to hold denuclearization talks. Pyongyang, however, shuts the door on the notion. All these and more on Early Edition at 6.
It's 6 p.m. here in Korea. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Thanks for joining us at this hour. We start off in the U.S., where a political shift in power is taking place.
That's right, and a sign that the American public may be displeased with President Barack Obama's performance so far. Republicans have won control over the Senate after winning some key states in the midterm elections.
And our Connie Lee has more on the implications of their huge win.
It's a big win for Republicans. They now have full control of the U.S. Congress.
And I just want to tell you right now that with your help and God's will, we will change the direction of our country.
Seen as a referendum on President Barack Obama, Tuesday's midterm elections brought out the voters who are unhappy about the current administration and the political gridlock in Washington. Republicans maintained their majority in the House and gained control of the Senate by picking up at least 6 seats in tight races all across America. The GOP sweep first started with Shelley Moore Capito, who won in West Virginia.
We were one of the first states to send a message to President Obama tonight that this president's agenda just isn't working for West Virginia.
Another winner was Republican leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, who was re-elected. Seen here casting his vote earlier in the day, McConnell is now set to become the Senate's majority leader. Analysts have been predicting a Republican victory as President Obama's approval ratings have hit their lowest levels since his inauguration. According to the latest Gallup poll, Obama's approval rating stands at just 42%, with 53% disapproving of his job as president. When the Republicans officially take over the Senate in January, it will be a tough final 2 years for the Obama administration. As of now, it's silence from the White House. But President Obama is set to make a public statement on Wednesday. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And America's top diplomat, John Kerry, has once again asked for China's help in getting North Korea to give up its nuclear program, saying support is not only wanted but necessary. But talks with the North seems far-fetched, as Pyongyang says it has no interest to discuss the matter with Washington. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says he hopes to work closely with China to make North Korea realize that its current path only leads to a dead end. In a speech at Johns Hopkins University on Tuesday, Kerry said North Korea will only realize security and prosperity when it gives up its nuclear program. The U.S. diplomat also stressed the importance of cooperation with China on non-proliferation. Last week, Kerry praised Beijing for putting pressure on the North by putting limitations on trade going into the country. China is North Korea's last remaining major ally and a key provider of food and fuel supplies. Kerry is scheduled to visit China this week for a range of multi-bilateral meetings, a week ahead of President Barack Obama's visit to Beijing for the APEC Leaders Summit. Kerry's comments come as North Korea ruled out holding talks with the United States regarding either its human rights or nuclear issues. A spokesperson from the North's foreign ministry said Tuesday Pyongyang would not discuss such topics with enemies that aim to topple the regime, adding it's only willing to speak with countries that respect its sovereign rights. Watchers say the official statement linking human rights and nuclear issues could be an attempt to influence Washington ahead of a possible UN General Assembly vote on a resolution against North Korea's human rights abuses. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The White House says President Barack Obama will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping when he visits Beijing next week for the APEC summit. At the center of the discussion will be how to shape the new model of relations between the two superpowers and how to deal with North Korea's nuclear threat. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
In their first major meeting since the Sunnyland Summit in June last year, Presidents Barack Obama and Xi Jinping are expected to try and answer a tough question. What will the relationship of their nations look like in the future? The White House says Obama will hold bilateral talks with his Chinese counterpart next Wednesday in Beijing on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. President Xi wants a new model of great power relations in which Beijing will have a bigger say in the region. China has been taking strides by escalating maritime confrontations, launching new diplomatic initiatives like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and toughening its position on issues like cybersecurity. While Washington has resisted such ambitions, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry stressed the importance of getting the relationship right.
The U.S.-China relationship is the most consequential in the world today, period. And it will do much to determine the shape of the 21st century. That means that we have to get it right.
The two leaders will also discuss regional and global issues ranging from North Korea's nuclear program, the Ebola outbreak, pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, and China's territorial dispute with Japan in the South China Sea. President Obama's 6-day, three-nation trip also takes him to Burma and Australia. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
A big cause of concern for Korean businesses here, especially those who are closely linked with exports and competing with Japanese rivals in the international stages, is the plummeting yen. And to share with us some insights into the impact of the weakening yen on Korea, we are joined on the line by Professor Shin Seong from Sookmyung Women's University.
Right. Professor Shin, thanks for making the time for us.
Okay.
Actually, so it's the Korean automakers that have been hit hard by the weak Japanese currency. So could you share with us the struggles that those automakers are facing right now?
Yeah, I mean, the auto industry, one of the industries that hit hardest because we have to compete with the Japanese competitors in the global market, especially in the U.S. and the European market. And because of the weakening yen, the price of Japanese-made cars become very less expensive in the market. But the Korean automakers cannot cut down their prices. So price competitiveness is the area that Korean automakers are facing greatest challenge. And the only advantage that we could have or to cope with that trouble is quality. But everybody knows that, quality for Korean automakers is a little behind the Japanese. So we lack competitiveness in the price and the quality. So I think that is the challenge that the Korean automakers are facing now.
So what can they do to overcome those challenges and difficulties in the face of the weak Japanese yen?
Well, first, I think that the exchange rate of the Korean currency has to move a little, in pace with the Japanese yen weakness against the dollar. But I think it seems to be pretty difficult. If then, I think, Korean automakers have to cut their the cost by being more competitive in labor cost and manufacturing cost, meaning that the workers at the auto industries have to sacrifice to some extent to compete with the Japanese competitors in the global market.
Well, making headlines is, of course, the big guns of Korea that are heavily hit hard by the weakening yen. But, of course, there are apparently some silver linings. I believe there are certain businesses or industry that can actually benefit from this recent turn of events.
Yeah, I mean, mostly the importers from Japan or the companies which use extensive Japanese-made parts. That will be areas where most beneficiary of the weakening yen.
But so, I mean, there are losers and winners due to this trend, but what should the government do for the losers? And I mean, should the Bank of Korea even further lower the key interest rate to counteract this trend?
well, the government has to make the auto industries to be more competitive by temporarily lowering the tax burdens or give more subsidies to research and development. But, the things that worries me most is the full effect of weakening yen has to come yet. Usually it takes about 2 years for the exchange rate to have a significant effect upon industry. Especially automakers take 2 years lag. So meaning that the weakest yen has begun about 2 years ago, and then nowadays the pace of yen depreciation becomes even faster. So what worries me is not now, but the impact to be felt in about a year later or even 2 years later. I think that is the things that worries most to me.
So should the government even lower the benchmark key interest rate?
Well, interest rate, yeah, I mean, in theory, if the interest rate is lowered, it might have a little effect upon weakening the value of Korean currency. But another side of that is that, if the Korean interest rate becomes lower, then there is going to be a huge outflow of capital from Korean market, which induces a very unstable financial market. So I think that is very, very dangerous, dangerous for the government to take action on that.
Well, there are some experts, analysts, or critics of the Korean economy or business structure that says some companies, or most of them, should have been prepared for something like this when they might lose the advantage in the price competitiveness.
Right.
What is your take on that? Do you agree with them?
Yeah, agree. Yeah, because we know that the yen has been moving down for almost 2 years now, and we knew that the effect would be felt after a year or two, which is now. So the Korean industry as well as the government have to prepare for this kind of challenges. But I think one of the critical the solution to that is, of course, the exchange rate policy. The government has to maintain stability. But another factor is that the government has to support the industries to become more competitive, not in the price, but in the quality. In other words, Korean automakers should be the top end, the high end producers, like a comparable to Benz or high end Japanese automobile. So I think in that area, I think there's going to be a lot of things that the industry and the government has to do in cooperation.
So if it's not price, they have to work on improving the quality, I guess.
Right, exactly.
All right, thank you for the time, Professor Shin.
Okay, thank you.
Shifting gears, Korea and Qatar have agreed to jointly pursue a coal thermal power plant construction project in southern Turkey, following a meeting between President Park Geun-hye and Qatari Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani on Wednesday. Seoul and Doha signed an MOU to take part in the $14 billion plant construction project. By combining Korea's advanced technology with Qatar's experienced capital management, the two sides are seeking to win similar infrastructure construction bids in third countries. President Park then sought Doha's support for Korean firms to win orders ahead of the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar. She also promoted Korea's Northeast Asian Oil Hub initiative and then asked Qatar and other oil-producing countries to participate. Over on Korea's political front, pension reform is the hot topic on the last day of a parliamentary questioning session at the National Assembly today. But if the opposition party is going to go along with the ruling party's plan to overhaul the system, it wants something in return. Ji Myung-gil has more.
The ruling Saenuri Party may be ready to make a deal to make sure its plans to overhaul the nation's pension scheme for public servants passes through.
If we don't reform the pension program, the government will record a pension deficit of some $9.2 billion each year, which will be a disaster for our future generations and create a national burden. We ask for the cooperation of civil servants.
Pundits believe the ruling and opposition parties are working on a closed-door agreement that gives each side a concession to make it happen. The ruling party would gain support for its pension reform plans, while the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy would get a parliamentary investigation into the 4 major rivers project, a green growth project launched under the previous Lee Myung-bak administration.
3 out of 4 people are calling for a parliamentary probe into the 4 major rivers project. The probe is aimed at digging up how taxpayer money was used. There is no reason for the rival parties to quarrel over the issue.
Environmental activists have long been critical of the $20 billion project, claiming that it has seriously harmed water quality and river ecosystems. The opposition has said it would only consent to the pension reform bill after a social consensus is reached, but the party has said that modifying the pension system is needed for fiscal sustainability. The parliamentary bill would seek to rein in the pension system that would require some $46 billion in taxpayer money over the next 10 years. The governing Saenuri party says all pending bills, including the pension reform bill, could be up for discussion, raising hopes that a bipartisan deal may be reached soon. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And Korea is known for its chaebol, or conglomerates that dominate the domestic economy, but that leaves little room for new startups to flourish. And that is shown in a new report which says more than half of newly established companies were new affiliates of conglomerates. Connie Kim reports.
The playing field for Korean businesses has gotten steeper over the past decade, with the big getting bigger and fewer firms finding their footing. Among Korea's largest 500 companies, management evaluation firm CEO Score says the number of companies who have been in operation for less than 20 years has dropped over the past 10 years from nearly 200 in 2004 to 164 as of last month. Look a little closer and the problem becomes even more apparent, as 63% of the newly established companies were spearheaded by conglomerates.
Over the past decade, more conglomerate affiliates have been created compared to startups, and the environment that nurtures new businesses so they can start from scratch has deteriorated.
While conglomerates were branching out with their affiliates, only 19 of the 500 largest companies in Korea began as startups. The IT sector made up a large portion of that figure, topped by the internet portal site Naver and gaming development company NCSoft. In the short term, CEO Score forecasts a tough road ahead for the establishment of new companies, citing the sluggish domestic economy.
The Park Geun-hye administration is trying to create favorable business conditions for new businesses, but I think it's more important for conglomerates to provide a solid ground for startups to establish themselves.
While smaller companies are trying to make inroads, the Korean economy continues to be dominated by long-running giants such as Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor, and Hyundai Heavy Industries, companies that have been operating for more than 4 decades. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Korea's foreign exchange reserves dropped for the 3rd straight month in October. This marks the first time the figure has slumped for more than 3 months in a row since the 2008 global financial crisis. The Bank of Korea says that the country's foreign reserves amounted to $363.7 billion as of the end of October, down $680 million from the previous month. The central bank attributed the decline to the weakening euro and British pound against the greenback. The profitability gap between Samsung and Apple continues to widen, with Apple's 3rd quarter profit margin standing almost 4 times larger than that of Samsung Electronics. The Korean tech giant recorded an operating profit margin of 7% in the July to September period. That's far below Apple's 27%. That means Samsung gains $7 in profit out of every $100 worth of products sold, while Apple gets $27. Samsung's profitability has trailed Apple since the year 2011. LG Electronics and Google have signed a cross-licensing agreement that will give both companies access to each other's patents. The deal will include existing patents as well as ones that are registered up until the year 2023. Through the agreement, LG will gain access to Google's software patents such as data processing and information security, while Google gets the right to use LG's hardware devices. The two companies say the deal will boost their relationship and allow them to focus more on developing products and services together. And the low earnings report from Samsung Electronics in the third quarter has started a ripple effect that has prompted local security firms to downgrade their forecast to other firms. They say the impact is likely to carry over well into next year. Our Kim Ji-hye reports.
One by one, local securities firms are lowering their projections for Korean shares next year, citing a lack of growth momentum in the domestic economy. Kyobo Securities Company points to a faster than expected slump in exports as one of the main reasons, citing an earnings shock from Samsung Electronics in the third quarter of this year.
There is no growth engine to supplement the low earnings performance of Samsung Electronics. The country's automobile sector isn't likely to improve anytime soon, either due to low global demand, and this will spill over to Korean shares next year.
The analyst adds the shares may fluctuate within a wide margin as the Korean economy undergoes structural reforms. Projections for this year's main benchmark Kospi aren't all that bright either, as the gap between Korean shares and global shares are widening. The Kospi fell nearly 4% from the start of the year, the steepest drop among Asian countries. In contrast, the Dow Jones reached an all-time high, rising nearly 5% over the same period, while Japan's Nikkei inched up 3.5% on the back of Tokyo's expansionary monetary policies. Kim Ji-hye, Arirang News.
You know, I've lived in a tropical climate for almost all my life, so when it gets cooler and we have vapor coming out of our mouths, and when it's time for people to really pack up those warm clothes that look like giant gloves of cotton, it's always an interesting sight. And it looks like that time is coming quite soon.
Yes, and it's very dry these days, so many people are catching colds as well. And for more, let's go to Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, how are things looking?
Good evening, guys. Hope you got some time to spend time outdoors today, because it was another typical late autumn day under clear skies, but clouds are slowly moving in some regions. Also, at the moment, a dry weather watch is in effect here in Seoul, as well as parts of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces. Humidity levels are down to 26% in some areas. As for tomorrow, the 10-degree gap in numbers between the days and nights will continue, so make sure to dress warmly. And besides that, showers are forecast for regions along the eastern coast due to winds blowing from the west to the east. It looks like about 5 to 10 millimeters will drop there tomorrow and on Friday, and also another round of showers are forecast for Jeju over the weekend. Otherwise, overall late autumn conditions are in store. Seoul and Gwangju reach 18, Daegu and Busan 20. On to other regions. Jeju hits 18, while Dokdo starts off the day at 14 before reaching 16. Mount Kumgang drops below 0 in the morning before reaching up to 7. That's all the updates I have for you now. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday evening. Stay hydrated, and I'll be back with more after 8.
Thank you for that, Bo-kyung. Well, it's a really difficult time for Korean automakers and those who are hit hard by the Japanese yen's plummeting. But I always believe that when you overcome adversities, you become that much stronger, like all the financial crises that we've overcome in our own unique fashion.
Exactly.
Well, we've run out of time. We have come to the end of our newscast. I am Daniel Choy, wishing you a good day or good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. And of course, Ji-hye, thank you so much for coming in to swoop in for the rescue while Pyongyang was away.
I know. Thanks for bearing me, Daniel, and the viewers. And thanks for watching today's newscast as well. And do join us again same time tomorrow with Hyunkyung instead of me. And goodbye.